If you were to look back only a few years ago, you would maybe find a couple of shows every season that had some incredible noteworthy visuals and animation, while the rest of them all kind of looked the same. But now in the year 2024, saying a show has good animation is kind of a meaningless thing when every show that's coming out looks better than the last. Just this season alone we have Oshinoko, which continues to blow my mind with its majestic visuals, a story about samurais with a lot of nail-biting, ground-sweeping, blood-pumping action sequences, a rom-com anime about some short-haired losing heroines which is a literal cinematic work of art, another rom-com that looks better than 90% of fantasy isekai coming out every season, and an anime called Days with My Stepsister which looks so aesthetically pleasing that I almost started rooting for their incestuous relationship. I think you get the point. But out of the 20 different well-made shows coming out every season, there's always that one anime that makes the rounds in the community for having the best of the best production values, a lot of spectacular fight scenes, and some crazy smooth animation. Wistoria Wands and Swords is that anime this season. The story of Wistoria on paper sounds like the most basic shit ever. Like, here's how the first episode goes. Will Serfort is a loser main character who cannot use even the most low-level magic spells properly, for which he is ridiculed and bullied every single day by his comically evil classmates and teachers, who relentlessly make fun of him for aiming to become a wizard. For aiming to become a Magia Vende. But of course, there is that one female character who unconditionally supports the MC, and a mentor who sees the true hidden potential in our boy Will, because I'm sure you never could have imagined in a million years, but Will is actually a fucking beast who can take down some insanely powerful monsters using only his physical strength and sword skills. Honestly, at this point, I could practically be describing the plot to Black Clover and you wouldn't even realize it, because that's just how overused this plotline is in fantasy anime. I mean, the only thing separating Asta and Will is the sound of incoherent screeching. Now, I'm not saying that shows with similar sounding premise are inherently bad or anything. What matters is whether or not the show uses those pre-existing elements to its advantage by transforming and building upon those ideas to make a genuinely compelling, if not a truly original story. Wistoria, unfortunately, is not one of those shows. It doesn't explore any new ideas using its fantasy setting like Dungeon Meshi does. It doesn't have the most fleshed out or human characters like Freerun does, and it certainly doesn't use the typical overpowered main character in a nuanced way to tell an inspiring story like Mob Psycho does. If anything, Wistoria has almost every single fantasy anime trope you can think of. The childhood friend who motivates our main character to aim for the highest of ranks, Kaiju number 8 has that. The female friend who has a thing for the main character but he's too dense to realize it, that's harem anime in a nutshell. The openly racist people discriminating against others for their privilege, 86 does that much better. The NPC background characters who have no identity of their own outside of hating on the main guy for everything he does and glazing other dudes for their achievements, that's basically every single trash isekai anime ever made. At least Mashal was an obvious parody of these overpowered fantasy stories, but here, everything is taken extremely seriously to the point that I can't help but laugh at some of the shit that happens in this anime. Like, I initially thought that this Edward guy was a stand-in character for Professor Snape, but then episode 2 of Wistoria came out and I realized that this guy is just a massive hater. Kinda like Gio. Okay, sure, Snape wasn't exactly a role model teacher for the first 7 movies, but I don't remember the part where he viciously beat up Harry Potter with his magic spells and then proceeded to step on his head as he helplessly laid on the ground just to show him how superior magic users are. This guy really should not be a teacher. But it's so easy to overlook the generic writing when the visuals have a solid grip on your attention at every second of any episode. When I first saw the trailer for this anime, I knew we were in for some great action and animation. But this final product is way better than anything I had expected. The anime opens up on these swift hand gestures performing some kind of magic as we soon cut to the grandiose image of our main character Will walking down this hallway, leading us directly into a fast-paced dungeon fight that looks extremely dynamic and dangerous, only for Will to quickly finish things off by doing his best Gojo impression, all of which takes place not even a minute into the first episode. And this is only the beginning, because when I say that Wistoria has some top-tier animation, I'm not exclusively referring to the fights. There is some kind of motion in almost every scene of Wistoria, and the animation actually goes a step beyond just being a pretty showpiece to stare at. Take for example how in the first episode, when Edward calls upon Will to perform a magic spell in front of his classmates, the way the wand in Will's hand visibly shake before he casts a spell indicate that he isn't confident in his magic skills, which is proven within a few seconds by the deafening silence followed by the roaring laughter that fills the entire classroom. These small animated details add a layer of subtlety to an anime that's otherwise very on the nose with portraying good versus evil characters, which is actually another thing that the Wistoria anime excels at, the character animations. I'm in love with some of these shots of characters doing simple actions like walking around, reaching out, stumbling over, getting scared, getting flustered, celebrating a win, falling down in the most smooth as fuck way possible. And these are all scenes from just the first episode alone. But the one scene I find the most impressive is when Will searches through his notes. You can actually see the paper move along with the touch of his finger. This is such an easy thing to cut corners on when animating, and it's an even easier detail to miss as a viewer. So I appreciate the fact that they gave their best effort in making this anime look as fluid and fantastic as they could. And it's not just the animators who are bringing out their A game. The composer for Haikyuu and My Hero Academia is writing music for this anime like it's gonna be the next free run. The only complaint production wise that I've seen has been about the use of CGI. And to that I say, go watch I Became the Strongest and Annihilated Everything with Low Level Spells to experience what truly egregious use of CGI looks like. The CGI in that show isn't bad in the same way that X-Arm is bad, but instead it's the constant back and forth between 2D and 3D models of characters being replaced irregularly that makes that anime so jarringly bad. Compared to that, I'll take the CGI in Wistoria any day since it's never used on the characters, the monsters or the giant army of columns, but is kept reserved for these waving flags and those massive structures that gives off a better sense of scale and makes the scene feel that much more lively. But enough about the CGI. We're here to watch those crispy, clear, awesome fights that the trailers had promised us, which is indeed where the anime truly excels at. Because the manga is jam-packed with fights, we've been getting some kind of action in every episode of Wistoria till now, with each fight trying its best to one-up itself. Like seriously, there is no reason for these fights to look this good. I might not like Edward as a teacher, but I gotta hand it to him. His dark magic looks intoxicating. The beautiful purple explosions they leave behind are literal eye candy, and his eventual clash with Will was unexpectedly a super hype moment. When comparing the same fight to the one in the manga, I cannot feel the same level of impact or energy that is emanating from this adaptation. Don't get me wrong, the art in the manga looks solid throughout, while the fights are clean and easy to follow with some cool panels to boot. But the anime, it's in a league of its own. The neon lights used whenever a magic spell is casted, the vibrant color palette popping out the screen whenever a major event commences, and the astonishing soundtrack that turns up a notch whenever shit's about to go down, all come together in an incredibly beautiful show of the most jaw-dropping moments you'll find this season. I do wish story-wise they focus more on the world of Wistoria, which sounds like a genuinely interesting place where things like the sun and moon are mentioned as though they exist only in mythology, and the sky itself is artificially held up by the Magia vendor. It feels like such a cool concept to explore and play around with, but I guess for the time being, the story is trying to build up the characters a bit more before going in depth on the world building, which is fine for now as long as the anime keeps up the great production quality. In a way, this anime is like the Zom 100 and Windbreaker of the season, where as long as you don't think too much about what's going on in the story, you can witness some of the most ridiculously fun and hype moments in anime, such as a humanoid shark zombie getting electric punched by a local office worker turned hero, and a high school kid jumping 100 people at once and kicking their asses in what is some of the smoothest animation for a delinquent anime that Tokyo Revengers can only dream of. However, the only difference between those other shows and Wistoria is that I have never seen anime fans almost universally agree that a show is carried only by its animation and not get put on a list by other anime fans. People like to argue that Demon Slayer is the definition of an anime that was carried by its animation, and while there is some truth to it, I believe there is still some originality and unpredictability in that show, which is why everyone gets so excited and hyped up for Demon Slayer in a way that Wistoria really cannot replicate. But if all that Wistoria as an anime came down to was a simple, silly and boring show, then I wouldn't be making this video. I know I just spent like half the video shitting on Wistoria's story and characters, but at least there's something to always look forward to in this anime. That something can be as simple as entertainment value, but it's still more than what those other half-baked fantasy isekais have to offer. I honestly feel like the story is starting to become somewhat promising, and the characters especially are kind of growing on me a bit as more and more episodes have been released over the weeks. Will Serford still isn't peak character writing by any means, but because of how earnestly he's portrayed in the anime as a hardworking good guy with upstanding morals, that alone already makes him a far better protagonist than other edgy loner overpowered main characters who became the strongest and annihilated everything with their low level spells. I think I should stop watching trash isekais for the sake of my mental health. In every episode of Wistoria, you can find some new things to love, some new characters to hate, and some top tier fights to wrap things off. Which is why I think as long as you're willing to overlook the average storyline and let the anime do its thing, you can have an absolutely amazing time watching one of the most fun shows of this season. Unless Wistoria decides to pull a Ninja Kamui and become a car crash near the end. Subscribe and check out some of my other stuff while you're at it. That's it for now, and thanks for watching.